Welcome, everybody. This is Bolt the Bird, an introduction to competitive Magic the Gathering. So how many of you have ever heard the term Bolt the Bird? All right, that's a disappointing amount of you, but also good. So bolting the bird is one of the oldest adages in competitive Magic the Gathering. If your opponent plays Birds of Paradise on turn 1 and you have a lightning bolt in hand, you kill it. That way you prevent your opponent from getting more resources than you. It's one of those little, well-known mnemonic devices that it's taken as a general rule, but it's not always the right answer. So just to get us started, this panel does assume that you know how to play Magic. It's geared towards people who play casually or play like EDH or kitchen table kind of Magic, but haven't ever gone to like a competitive REL tournament. So this is for you guys, which I'm aware is a fair amount of you. So just to take a poll, how many of you have ever played a game of Magic the Gathering? Okay, that's very good. How many of you have ever played at an FNM or a pre-release? All right. How many of you have ever played at a competitive REL tournament? All right. How many of you have ever played a Grand Prix or a MAGFest? And how many of you have ever played at a Mythic Championship? Okay, good. All right, that helps us get a little bit of an idea of who's actually in the room. So just to give a little introduction, my name is David Montier. I've been playing since about Born of the Gods. I'm not a fraudulent memer. All of my memes are perfectly legitimate and make perfect sense. And my favorite card is Noble Hierarch.
My name is Anneleise Faustino. I've been playing since RTR. I have 2 SCG Open top 8s. I have an SCG Classic finalist appearance. I have a Nationals top 64 and a Grand Prix top 64. My favorite card is Karn Liberated.
Hi, I'm Justin Miller. I've been playing since Innistrad. I won SCG Richmond back in August. And my favorite card is Mountain Goat.
I'm Philip Phelps. I'm an L2 out of Baltimore. I don't play well, but I help run the tournaments, so that's good, I guess. My favorite card listed is Judge of Currents, but a close second is Trade Post.
The one that I actually know what it does.
That makes
cool.
goats.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about going to your first competitive event. What should you expect? What should you bring? About half of you have already gone to a Grand Prix, so speaking of the other half. What is the structure of a match? Most of you also have played, but you're going to be playing, each match is 3 games of Magic. It's the best 2 out of 3. What you should bring to the tournament, you need your dice, your pen and paper, your deck, your sleeves, playmat, but especially when you're going to the big 9-round competitive events, you really need to bring water, snacks. I've gone all day without eating or drinking anything, and I end up with migraines at the end of the tournaments. And, being in a good headspace, keeping yourself healthy is very important during those 12 hours that you're going to be playing Magic over and over at the competitive level.
They're marathons, not sprints. It's get a good night's sleep beforehand. It's going to be a long day, but it's a lot of fun.
So when Wizards designed their organized play system, they set it up with a clear progression for how you should really get started playing organized. A lot of you have gone to FNMs and pre-releases, which is the best place to start. They're friendly, usually done at a local store. As you start to look at getting into the competitive scene, a lot of stores will run either regional 1Ks, WPN qualifiers now, or SCG IQs, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But these are a nice good step. They're the first ones you'll play at what's called competitive REL. And then after that, you can look at the bigger events, the SCG Opens, and the MAGFests, which are huge 9-round marathons of a day. The rules and enforcement levels that I just talked about, there's 3 of them. There's regular, which is what you will have seen at FNM or pre-releases and most other store events. And there we're going to focus on getting the game as close to correct as we can and teaching you what rules you may not have already known. Because no one's going to know every rule, not even most of the judges. We just know where to look them up. After that, you go to competitive REL. That's going to be your MAGFests, also your IQs. That is going to be we expect you to know how to play the game, and because of that, we can give penalties if you consistently make mistakes, and we will be a little more careful about how we fix the game. And then last, there's Professional REL, which is day 2 of a GP or any of the Mythic Championships. And that, we just let you make mistakes and then fix them later. But other than that, like exactly like competitive REL. We're just, at that point, you should know the game, and so we're not going to stop you from making a rules error. We will just fix it in post.
So I hope the rules enforcement doesn't scare you off of these events, though. I know that it took me probably 2 years to go to a competitive event because I was so concerned I'm going to make a mistake. I don't want to get in trouble with the judges. They've recently come out with Magic Arena. Magic Online's been around for a while, but Magic Arena is a free-to-play game. It's similar to Duels of the Planeswalkers, but more in-depth. It has all of Standard, all of Draft. And this is a really great tool to get you comfortable with playing Magic. With the rules set for you, your kitchen table players aren't going to be allowing you to make the mistakes. The game is here. And I wish I had had this tool when I was starting to play Magic. I think I would have gone to more competitive events sooner. But don't let the rules enforcement scare you. That progression from F&M to like a regional 1K, those like 50, 60 person tournaments, those are such a great stepping stone to start going to the larger marathon events.
So just to talk about what you're going to be playing at an event, it breaks down into different formats, which are different ways to play. We have limited formats where you open cards and play with the cards that you open out of booster packs. There's 2 different ways to do that, which are booster draft or sealed. Booster draft, you open 1 pack at a time at a table of other drafters, and you pass them around, taking 1 card at a time to build your deck. Sealed, you just get a handful of packs and you build the best deck that you can out of what you've been given. Most of the bigger marathon events now are constructed formats, like Standard, Pioneer, Modern, or Legacy. So I'll talk about those guys real quick here. Standard is just the most recent sets. It is a rotating format, unlike the other 3 major constructed formats, which means that as new sets come out, ones that are a little bit older will rotate out and no longer be legal for play. Generally, there is no or a very small ban list for Standard. The card pool is smaller. It's usually focused on creature combat, and it changes very quickly. The metagame will shift as people explore the new counter to the deck that was good last week. Pioneer is our newest format. This was
Like 2
created
months ago?
2 months ago. 3
Yeah,
months
it's
ago?
pretty
Yeah,
recent.
it's brand new essentially. It's not rotating. Every card that is legal since RTR will stay legal for as long as we have Pioneer. It's really exciting because it is brand new, so people are trying out new decks. The so-called best deck has changed over and over again in the past 3 months. The power level of the format is definitely higher than Standard. It's a lot faster. You have a lot of acceleration for your turn 1 plays, or you have powerful turn 1 plays like Thoughtseize to interact with your opponent out of just from the start of the game. And this is calming down, but since the format was brand new, they very aggressively banned strategies and took cards out of the format that Wizards found to be too powerful or constraining to design and gameplay. So there was a lot of bans for the past 3 months.
It's a really cool adrenaline rush to get your deck to watch your deck get banned every week consistently. It's like, wow, all of this money I spent is just gone.
Modern is our second non-rotating format. It's from 8th edition forward. We've got a whole bunch of cards on the ban list. The other ban list has been managed not as often as Pioneer, but some cards have come off, some cards have gone back on, come off and gone back on, because mistakes have been made. But it's a lot of fun. It's really high-powered cards. You can win on turn 2 in some cases, and there is a wide array of strategies. There's lots of different decks you can play in this format. And then my favorite is Legacy, which is any card. It's non-rotating, and it is any card in the game with a ban list of things that were the most egregious mistakes ever, which is not. It's growing. It's not that small. It's as strong as it gets. You can win on turn 1. You get to play with cards that let you ramp out extremely expensive creatures for free, or you can cast your entire hand on turn 1, or you can interact with anything at any given moment because you have spells that cost no mana, like Force of Will. One of the pillars of the format is blue, which is essentially becomes like its own archetype, because there's so many powerful blue cards from back in the day. But unfortunately, since it's old cards, they are also expensive, which can be a barrier to entry, but it is really interesting when you get a chance to play it.
So there's a concept in competitive Magic called the Metagame Clock. The general idea here is that if you take a deck, you can kind of break it down into one of a number of general strategies. You have like aggro decks, which are lower to the ground. They'll often play a lot of cheaper cards. And the goal is to kill your opponents as quickly as possible. You don't want to let them do whatever they're trying to do. You just want to finish the game before it even starts. There is control, which is designed to make the game go as long as possible and prevent your opponent from doing anything until you can stabilize. You know, if your opponent is playing like burn spells, you can gain life and basically prevent your opponent's strategy until you can stabilize, play a, usually a bigger threat, and then turn the game around with maybe 1 or 2 cards. And mid-range is a little bit of a mix of the two. It plays a lot of lower cost removal to prevent your opponents from getting their game plan started, and then sort of after the first few turns you want to land a threat here or there that might keep your opponent off of their game plan and start turning the corner and generating advantage for yourself. And they have this almost rock, paper, scissors-like effect where aggro tends to beat control because control is often a little too slow to stop aggro. Control beats mid-range because mid-range, they're both trying to play a slightly longer game. Control just does it better. And mid-range beats control because it's able to stop aggro in the early game and then get its plan together before it ever really has time to take off. And archetypes don't necessarily fall into these neat categories in practice, but it's definitely a good place to start looking at it from. There's other archetypes like combo, which is I want to pick 1 or 2 cards that have a really good synergy with each other, like show and tell, which says 3 mana, put a creature or any other permanent onto the battlefield, and Emrakul, which is a big 15 mana thing that will basically end the game on the spot. So you are trying to assemble a collection of cards that basically end the game then and there. There's Prison, which is something that attempts to just lock the game down entirely and prevent your opponent from playing at all through different effects like Chalice of the Void, which says, pay 2x mana and counter any spell with that converted mana cost. But cards aside, the metagame clock is a good way of categorizing how decks operate and how a metagame shifts over time.
All right, so I want to talk about sideboarding in competitive Magic. About half to 2/3 of your games are going to be sideboarding, so this is something that you don't want to leave by the wayside. Between games in a match, you're going to be switching out between your 60-card main deck and your 15-card sideboard. I put up the deck Storm here, which is a combo deck, and so what they're trying to do is beat whatever hate permanents their opponent's going to bring in, stuff like Trinister, stuff like Chalice of the Void. And in order for this combo deck to beat those kinds of permanents, they need things like bounce spells. So the sideboard is set up with bounce spells, spells that remove those types of permanents, stuff that stops hand disruption, stuff that stops counter spells. So when you're sideboarding, when you're making a sideboard, you want to build a cohesive 75. You're not just putting in any random 15 things. You are trying to deal with the entire metagame in 15 cards. And you need to look at your deck, look at how it's built, and understand what other people are going to be doing to disrupt you. And yeah, your opponent boards in a rock, you need to go to level 2 and board in your piece of paper.
So how many of you have heard the term net decking before? How many of you use the term net decking in your day-to-day? So I would ask why people want to play Magic the Gathering, right? There are some people who want to be the best engineer. They want to build the best deck from the ground up and then use that to win. And then there are some people who want to be the best pilot. They want to take an already existing deck and bring that to a tournament and do well with it. Competitive Magic centers a lot more around the best pilot mentality, because a lot of the time, the best deck already exists, but you still have to be good at playing the best deck. You may not necessarily just be able to go to any old tournament with the brew that you have made at home and expect to win outright with it, but you can expect at least to still be able to go and have fun. It's just about knowing what you're trying to get out of the game.
So we talked a little bit about them earlier. MAGFests are Wizards' big event. They're run almost every weekend of a year. All across the globe, you can find them in other countries and other continents. They do come around here on the East Coast about once a quarter, and all across the United States 2 to 3 weekends out of any given month. They are big events. They frequently, in the main event, which is called a Grand Prix, will have anywhere from 500 to 1,500 players, with some of our larger ones well outstripping that. Vegas 2015 had 8,300 and some players in a single event. That is certainly the exception to the rule, but they are large. There's also, besides the large event, the main event, lots of side events you can do. They have on-demand drafts scheduled in any kind of format you can imagine. If you are looking for a game of Magic of a certain type, you will find it there. There's just that many people. Commander has also taken off there as well, so if you're not sure about wanting to play a competitive format all day, you can bring your Commander decks and have some fun after you've played some of the competitive. Important, it is free to get in. It's not free to enter the events, but it is free to get in, so if you want to get a feel for it, and there's one nearby, stop by. We'd love to see you. They also have artists there that you can get signatures from, and recently we've had a lot of cosplayers start coming out with some very impressive cosplays of angels and gods and all manner of other Magic characters.
If you want to get your cards signed, a lot of times, like Phil mentioned, the artists will actually go to MAGFests and do like commissions, things like that. So it's a pretty cool way to get some personalized stuff going. There's also just like, there's the heavily played bins from Star City where you can get some more expensive cards for cheap. I just love that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just an example of what the 2020 schedule's like. Like I said, it's about once a quarter that they're going to be on the East Coast. The one for the first quarter is coming up actually pretty soon. At the end of January, we're going to be in New Jersey. It's also a limited one, which means you don't have to have a deck pre-built. You can come and pay for the deck there, or you can just hang out inside Sland. It's a great place to be. And then, like I said, once a quarter, Charlotte. We have Columbus this year, and then DC near the end of the year. So I know you can all make that trip at least.
You know, play the game, see the world. You can go all over the world and play Magic.
You can see hotel rooms across the world.
We also have the Star City event schedule. Star City Games is it's a retailer that sells Magic cards, but they held fantastic events on the East Coast mainly, and also in the Midwest. So this does not lead into the Pro Tour. It leads into the Invitational, which is also run by Star City Games. But they're pretty large. They range between like 300, 600 people. So this is another good chance to play a large 9 to 15 round tournament, depending on how you do.
And just some spare resources for you guys. A lot of these listed up here if you happen to be interested in snapping a picture. These are a lot of good websites just to get a feel for like articles, where to actually buy cards, what the metagame looks like. MTG Top 8 is, like I'm on that site almost twice a day. I may just have a problem. Yeah, but it's a good place to figure out what competitive decks actually look like and what people are playing and what's good, because they have all the tournament listings and the tournament results from pretty much everything. I can still find like the one tournament I won in 2016. Other than that, Star City Games and Channel Fireball and TCG Player are three of the biggest like card retailers, so they sell Magic.
They also have articles on strategy or metagames.
That too. And if you're interested in more like actual competitive play theory, I would highly recommend Googling Level 1 by Reed Duke. It is basically a comprehensive article on like what card advantage is, what a metagame is, how to be good at Magic. If you just like have a little time to sit down and read that, it's a really good resource.
All right, so we want to take questions from you on what it's like to be what do you want to know about being a competitive Magic player, or how to make that jump to playing Grand Prix, playing Opens?
Do you want to know what the glitz and glamour of being a competitive Magic the Gathering player is like? Do you want to see behind the screen? Yes, you in the back there.
Yeah, what's the lifestyle like?
I can't quite describe it. I don't have words for it. I play a lot of Magic and I have little money.
We are.
Yeah, sure. Real question.
I find competitive culture in like video gaming or card gaming sometimes to be a little bit hard to approach. How do you deal with that?
So the question was, this man finds competitive culture in like card gaming and video gaming to be a little difficult to approach, and just what our thoughts are on that and how to go about it.
That's a big question. I've definitely found it to be more difficult to be a woman who plays the game. There's a lot of the hardest thing I find is that when you're moving, trying to breach that gap between casual and competitive play, people just don't take you as seriously. You'll have friends that started playing with you at the same time. You'll have better results, and they will still listen to their other friends over you. And the biggest thing that I did was I just found found the smaller groups of people who are incredibly supportive. You know, there's always going to be not very kind people in any community, but finding your niche people there, the best friends I've ever made are in Magic. And it takes a while to find them, but it is incredibly worth it.
I think, personally from my experience, I started going because I was interested in playing the game, and as time went on, just by talking to the people I was playing in rounds or kind of just like working my way into various conversations, I just met more and more people, and now I'm sitting in front of you talking about it. It's just a matter of like being able to step back from the people who you don't want to engage with in the community, and being willing to wait until you find the ones who do, because they exist and they're around and they're pretty cool people to hang out with and just play a bunch of games with.
Yeah, I'd second or third all of that about finding your friends group. That helps a ton. The other thing is, don't be afraid to call a judge. Yes, there are going to be competitive people there, but all of the judges that are doing this do it because they love the game and because they love being at tournaments, and we want to help you. So if someone's making you uncomfortable, or just like you think they're trying to cut the corner or something like that, call a judge. We'll come over, we'll talk, we'll sort it out, and we'll make sure everybody's having a good time. That's what we're there for. We're there to help.
But Phil, I hear you saying, does this only apply during a match? Can you only call a judge during a match?
You can call a judge anytime. If you're at an event, or actually, frankly, if you walk down the hall and yell "judge," you'll know who is a judge.
Yeah.
We love taking these questions. It's what we do. A lot of us do it as a significant or reasonably significant portion of their income for a year. So like, this is what we do. Feel free to talk to us. If we're in the middle of something that we can't pause, we will kindly let you know that, and then come find you later or talk to you later. Sometimes we are in the middle of a tournament function that just has to be done right now. Don't feel bad if we're like, here's another judge who can help you, or I'll talk to you in just a minute, I need to post these parents, whatever. But we like to help, and we will do everything we can.
Yeah. Yes.
How did you become a judge?
So, this recently changed. We now have Judge Academy. It's a company. Yeah, company.
It's an organization.
Run by some of the people that have been big. They used to run big events. They haven't been recently, but and other judges who help run it. They have a website. If you search for it, it's judgeacademy.com. They have a bunch of online courses you can take that focus on some of the rules, as well as how to handle customer interaction, because judging is a customer service position. Like, we're there to make your event better. That's what our job is. And once you do that, they'll have a test at the end. Once you take the test, and now there's a fee to be a judge, certified by Judge Academy. Once you are a judge, talk to a local store. You can run events there. Of note, if you think you might be interested in becoming a judge, but don't want to put down the $100 for a level 1 judge certification for the year, events can be run by people that are not judges. So talk to a local store. Have them be like, I've taken the rules advisor, which is free on Judge Academy. I've taken that, so I know the rules. Let me run an event or two. If I like it, I might become a judge, but you can do it. And then once you do that, you become a level 1. You can start judging more. You talk to your local community. They're their best resource. If you know any judges, always talk to them. They're great resources as well. And then eventually you can test for L2, move up the ranks. Being a judge at a GP or an open is hard as an L1. It's not impossible. We do take some every time, but they tend to be mostly L2s. L1s, you also don't get paid as much, so it can be hard to make that travel.
So just a little addendum to what Phil said. There is something called a rules advisor, which is not a judge, but still certifies that you know what you're talking about. And like you said, that test is totally free, so I think that's a good place to start. Yeah,
that's a good place to start, especially if you're mostly judging locally.
You and then you.
So I've been playing Magic very casually for a very long time, and I can find that when you sit at a table, even casually, but especially competitively, with someone who knows what they're doing more than you, it can be really challenging to get them to like slow down and explain what they're doing, and not just say the name of the card and then put it straight to the graveyard. How do you handle, as a person who's still learning how to play, making people meet you where you are with your knowledge?
So
Go ahead.
So this is one where you kind of just got to be willing to put your foot down and say, hey, I don't know what that card does. Let me go ahead and read that and think if I have a response for a second. It's not, you're the judge. It's not going to be considered slow play to take a second and read your opponent's cards, especially if you're only playing at like regular REL. Professional is where you would be expected to know your opponent's cards.
You are never expected to know from a rules standpoint, you are never expected to know what your opponent's cards do, only what yours are. At an event, if someone is refusing to slow down, call a judge, they are not allowed to do that. They are required to let you read the card and make decisions based on that. They can't force you through by like putting it into the graveyard and being like, oh, it already resolved. They have to give you that option. At the casual, unfortunately, there's not much else you can do other than put your foot down and be like, yo, I don't know what that card does, let me read it. But at an event, call a judge, and you should never feel obligated to know what your opponent's cards do. Knowing what your cards do is very important, especially as you get too competitive and especially professional REL.
A really good tool for that is starting to play on Magic Arena and just getting more familiar with Standard and Draft, which is probably, if you are going to be playing Modern, Pioneer, Legacy, anything else, you can move to Magic Online. There are rental card services that can help you play literally any deck you want to play in the game, switch out different decks, although those can be a bit expensive. But just playing with the online stuff where you're not forced to have someone sitting there being rude to you. Obviously, if they are actually being rude, call a judge. But getting yourself up to that level where you're comfortable with the format itself.
Right. There's homework you can do before going to a tournament.
Yes.
As a follow-up, my opponent's cards aren't in English or don't even have words.
Call a judge.
So one of the resources we showed was Gatherer. If you're playing casually, you can go on. It's a list of...
it's the database.
It's the database of all the cards. It has the official rules text, including any changes they've made since it's been printed, because old cards get weird. Just putting that out there. So you can always look up on that if you're playing casually. If you're at an event, call for a judge. We pull up the Oracle text, the official card text, and we'll tell you what it is. They're not allowed to lie about what the card is. But if you can't read their copy, call a judge and we'll get you the Oracle text.
And if you have to do that for every card in their deck, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask. Always ask. Especially even if you know every single card is in English, and every single card you know what it does individually, but they're attacking you with a creature and you don't know. You just ask them what the size of it is. What does it do? What is the state of this creature? If any time you're not sure what's going on, just ask your opponent, and then if they don't explain it super clearly, just grab a judge, get it sorted out, know what's going on.
We should
it
have just
always
called
feels
this
better.
panel "Call a Judge."
Yeah.
Yes.
This question's for Anneleise. I know you like to play Tron in Modern.
Why?
Well, like, the more in-depth question would be like, picking a deck you like in Modern and like what draws
Yes.
you to certain archetypes.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to be a little shitter.
Yeah. How do you choose an archetype that you like? I love playing archetypes that are over the top, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. I love playing ramp decks, so Tron, to play, 7 mana cards on turn 3. I love it. Or I play Prison and Legacy. Let's play a bunch of broken soul lands. Let's play Chalice on turn 1 and make everyone sad. I want to do something big and powerful when I play Magic. And I do find that when I play mid-range decks, I don't love it. I'm not thriving when I play those kinds of decks. So finding an archetype that you personally love, and maybe that's aggro. Like, I want to bolt my opponent, I want to play 5 bolts and they're going to die.
Yeah.
Finding, you just need to try everything out, find something that you love, and I've found that I've performed best with the archetypes that I enjoy and not the ones that I feel like I'm forced to play because they're the best.
Maybe even just go watch some coverage, watch an SCG and watch what both decks are doing and think, which one of those would I want to be? Which one of those cards would I want to be holding?
So, say you decided you want to go to whatever next event you have, and it's say 2 months away or whatever. So you start going to your resources and practice, and you do all your due diligence. But you don't have any friends or something, friends or other people you can trust, or not that you can't trust, but that who you respect is better than you, or maybe you just don't have friends. I'm leading up to something.
Yeah.
How do you manage your time and resources to properly evaluate your own plays to make sure that I want to unbiasedly see if I'm making the right plays? Is there a way to manage your time that you have at the pro tournament and to try and self-analyze how you're doing to try and improve within the limited time frame that you have? Without how would you tackle that without the help of someone who can play?
So, looking back on your own play and trying to find ways to improve and analyze in preparation for an event or something.
Specifically, if you don't have a network to
Right.
reach out to go for that analysis.
So, if you have a way to play, say if you're playing on Arena or Moto, if you have a way of recording your own gameplay, you can come back and watch it later, and then you can reanalyze your decisions and say, hey, at this point in time, I could have, made a different line, made it play out in a different way. It's also fun to think back after every match and maybe not play a whole bunch of games in quick succession, but to play and then try and think about any critical moments that were in that game that you could go and say hey, what was my biggest decision? Or, what went wrong in that game? How did they beat me? Or why did I win? And just, continuously ask a couple of these questions, maybe have a small list of them, and see if you can have any good answers for those questions after every practice.
What I personally do is that I test this is basically the only game I play. And I test this, I come home and I play Magic all night, but I test in sprints. So I will play 5 matches and I record all of these in an Excel spreadsheet and I figure out, why did I lose? Did I lose to myself, which is usually why I lost? Or what cards did my opponents play that felt extremely powerful? And I make little notes for these, and I'll have my sprint of 5 matches, and then I'll reflect on it. The other thing I do is that I'll test every single deck that's in the metagame. So I'll probably play 10 decks, 10 times each, and before I figure out which one of these do I want to now hone in on as the deck I'm going to play. And then I'll pick that deck and probably play 100, 200 matches with it. before I feel like I'm ready to now win a tournament. And I'm not going to win.
Alternatively, you could just set up a Twitch stream, and they will tell you.
Yeah.
They don't need to be your friends to give you advice.
Finding sideboard guides are a crutch, but when you're learning how to play a deck, it is a great place to start to figure out why are they sideboarding this card in this match. You need to do the work on how to analyze that, but making your own sideboard guide at the end of your testing run where you have your own and you're ready, it's on paper, you're going to bring it to the tournament. Every single match, I know what's coming in, what's coming out. And then one of the other things, I find that the competitive Magic Twitter is a really good, there's a lot of gossip that you need to cut through, but it's also, when you start, even if you're not networked with some of the pros, you can interact with them, and if you're saying insightful stuff, they will respond. And I've met a lot of people who are much better than me just by commenting on their Twitter posts.
Twitter and Twitch.
Twitter and Twitch.
You there in the back, all the way in the back. Yes, yes. Okay. So the question was, this person is not great at shuffling, and decks with a lot of shuffle. There are some decks in competitive formats that do involve a lot of shuffling. If you play something like fetch lands, how to, one, get better at shuffling? Would that be a desired goal of this question? And two, if you weren't shuffling well at a tournament, how to adjust for that, or what could be the effects of it? So at really high-level tournaments, it is almost a requisite. I'm turning to you every time I say something because you know so much better than I do.
So to answer the second part first, what could happen if you're shuffling? It's called insufficient shuffling. It is a warning to start with in the IPG. If it becomes a consistent problem, it does get upgraded, as with any of our warnings. You can, if you are having physical issues with shuffling, ask a judge, though I don't think many judges would take kindly to it happening a dozen times in a match. I think you still can, and we would, and you wouldn't get penalized, so it's probably still a better option than if you know it's not. As for how to get better at it, there really isn't a better choice than just do it. If someone in the crowd has a better advice for how to get better at shuffling, by all means.
So, yeah, for the person in the back, do you use sleeves on your cards? Okay, so sleeve up some bad cards that you don't care about, go to any Magic shop and get like 60 basic lands, sleeve those, and then just start shuffling those. You can look up videos on mash shuffling, which is the generally accepted method of shuffling. You get like one pile shuffle, so I honestly don't advise pile shuffling. What's that?
It's not a shuffle, that's why.
It's not a shuffle.
It is.
So I would recommend just like sleeving up some bad cards and practicing mash shuffling with some bad cards that you're not afraid about getting damaged.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
Is there some sort of policy for reasonable accommodation to have like a person with you who's like validates shuffle for you?
So if you have a physical disability of some kind or something like that, you can have a person there to help you shuffle. They can't help you make decisions, but you are perfectly allowed to have someone there to help you with the physical actions of playing the game, because that is not what we're trying to test. We are not trying to figure out who the best shuffler is or who can pull out. That's why we took all of the cards that were flipped from a quarter above the table. Those are all banned in every format because it's just dumb.
But I will prove that I am the best at making that flicking sound with my cards.
That's a challenge.
That is.
It's a personal challenge.
So if you have you can have someone there to help you. I have seen it, especially I've known a couple of players who had physical disabilities and they needed someone there, and that's fine. We can even give you permanent seating on the end of the row so that they have the space to be there.
Cool. Yes, you there with the golden wig.
So I find that a lot of people, when you're talking about gaining skill in Magic or becoming a more competitive player, talk about just playing over and over again. But one, there's lots of types of decks that I'm not familiar with and don't know how to play, like blue.
Okay.
I don't know how to do it. And so, like, sitting down and playing with a deck that I just don't understand, like, I don't feel like I'm going to succeed by just smashing my face into it over and over again until I understand how to do it right, because losing over and over again if I have no idea what's happening is not going to help me play better. And also, there are some types of interactions. It's like, I vaguely understand what's going on when there's a planeswalker being targeted by something as opposed to a player or a creature, but the minutia of it can be challenging to understand just from play. So are there any, like, Khan Academy educational resources for Magic in terms of, like, sitting down to take basically a class that's not involved in play? Is that what that level 1 is?
Yeah, that's what that is. So look up Level 1 by Reed Duke.
The other thing is there's some streamers are better about it than others, but some
Yes.
streamers will say what they're doing, and they'll talk through their plays, and that can be almost as good as playing it yourself, because at least you're hearing the thought process they're making. So if you can find a streamer you like who's pretty good about doing that, that'll help a lot too.
One thing that I've found that helps is watching the streamer play and then trying to, before they make the play, figure out what you want to do yourself and see if it lines up. And then trying to understand why it didn't line up when it doesn't.
Sometimes streamers will also respond if you present a possible option with whether or not they would do that thing by either doing that thing or not doing that thing. But I've hopped on Twitch streams and just been like, couldn't you have done this? And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess I could have. Yeah, or no.
If you do some research, there are often people who have their pet deck that they're really good at. Like you have
Caleb Scherer is
Scherer.
the Storm player.
Storm, and looking
Jim
up
Davis on Goblins.
goblins. I don't know if I'd play that.
We'll
though.
put him back.
Play goblins.
But
He plays it every time.
finding those people where they have their pet deck and looking up their content that they've made, whether it's an article, whether it's their YouTube videos, whether it's their Twitch VODs, or following them on Twitter, and they'll probably have posted a sideboard guide so that you can learn the intricacies of their pet deck.
You there.
Yeah, so we were talking about like the things you can bring to like a competitive like low level event. You mentioned like deck lists and like your own sideboard event. Are there limitations to that? Like, is it like one sheet of paper? Is it like
Okay.
a notebook?
Yeah, that's you.
So for the deck list portion, at competitive events, you do need a deck list. It'll be a sheet of paper. It has to be uniquely identified cards. So if you're playing Garuk, I don't even
Which
know what
Garuk are you playing?
If you just say Garuk, it's not good.
It's not good. You have to make sure they know exactly which card you're talking about, and it needs to be what you're actually playing. As for preferably on paper. We've gotten them on cake before. That was interesting. As for sideboard notes and things like that, if you take notes before a match starts, it can only really be about a page front and back total, and you can only look at them between games of that match. So like, if you have a sideboard guide, you can't look at it during game one. Once game one ends and you're getting ready for game two, you can look at it and decide what you're sideboarding, but you can't look at it during the games. If you take any notes during the game, they have to be on the table at all times. Your opponent doesn't have to be able to read them, but they have to be above the table, and then you can look at them throughout the entire match. That's fine.
A common thing to do that you may see at a competitive event is if someone plays a card that says your opponent reveals their hand, they will write down every card in your hand. That is totally legitimate, and you should also do it if you ever see anything. Like if you put something back in your opponent's hand, you should remember it or write it down, because that information could be relevant later, and it's just a really good strategic move.
or if you see an unusual card that you were not prepared for in game 2 and you know you're going to lose to it, write it down so that you're thinking about it when you're boarding for game 3. You need to have an out to that card that is, a silver bullet.
Cool. I saw a question there in the...
So aside from the technical aspect of play, something that I see a lot is players struggling with adjusting to that sort of experience or the culture that's there. And I was curious if you had any recommendations for players who feel like they go on tilt frequently, or how to resolve that, or how to avoid something on tilt.
This seemed like a lot of a personality question. As far as resolving tilt, I personally have gotten better at it through just analyzing the fact, what are the decisions I made that put me in this situation. Sometimes it's something that is just straight up my fault, and that means that all I can do is try to do better in the next game. If tilt is the specific focus, if it's something your opponent is doing, like a way they are acting, that is a scenario where you need to step back and say, I can call a judge if this is something I'm feeling in this scenario. This question has a lot of application in just about everything. How can I be doing better for myself, and what was under my control and what was not? Sometimes you just don't draw the right cards, and it helps to step back and say, that happens. Variance is a part of Magic the Gathering, and it's something we have to account for.
Part of that is also managing expectations for what exactly you're doing. If you bring your spicy list to a Grand Prix, you should not necessarily go into that tournament expecting to win. You should go expecting to have fun and do something wild in your matches and enjoy that. Those types of decks are not good for competitive play, and unless you're a genius. But understanding why you're playing the game, have you put in 200 matches of prep for this? Has my opponent done more research than me? And understanding where you are in it. And I think another part of that is that it's okay to be upset when you lose, or when your opponent top decks and they crush you from out of nowhere.
Right.
And part of that is just not putting it on the other people that you're with.
Yeah. You might not have drawn that last burn spell when your opponent was at 1 life, but instead of, and as hard as it is to not think about what that draw could have been, what you need to go back and think about is, the decisions that put you in that scenario are the productive way to think about that match or game of Magic. And, did you make the right block 3 turns earlier that set you up, or could you have, kept another creature around that would have gotten that last point of damage? So, you want to try and be, it's hard, but you want to be productive with the way you reflect on Magic, or matches of Magic.
2 last things on that, and this goes for tilt in any regard, not just Magic. 1, find what helps you, just focus on the next match. I've known players who meditated between matches. I've known players who just played music in their ears and let them, just ignore it. So find what works for you. And the other thing is, after you realize you've tilted, or at the end of the day, if you realize you've tilted, think about how you tilt. Because people tilt in different ways. Some people will tilt and try to do too much. Some people tilt and then they become really
reserved,
abject and reserved and don't focus anymore. And once you realize what you do when you tilt, you can start noticing you're doing it earlier and maybe cut it off at the pass kind of thing. So that comes up a lot in League players, I know. There is definitely different kinds of tilting in League. If you play a lot of it, you'll see it. But yeah.
If your reaction is to smash your controller, maybe just don't do that.
Right.
I was just going to say, on the schedule it actually says pushing past the tilt, life lessons from being at 4 o'clock. So.
Oh,
Also go to that.
Is that in this room?
It says Mage's Forum, Chesapeake, GD.
I have no idea where that
Up
is.
on the second floor of the main hall in the back area.
So if you would like to learn how not to tilt, go to the other panel. That's not our job.
Probably have better advice. Thank you.
Cool.
Any other?
Yes.
A lot. It is very deck dependent. If
Yes.
you're playing Tron, for example. You need to learn which decks need to mulligan frequently to win, and which decks you're going to struggle if you do mulligan. For example, Delver, where you're going to be using every single resource. You really don't want to mulligan unless your hand is really, like, unplayable.
You also want to think about what your opponent's doing. So if they're playing a attrition-y deck, maybe they have Thoughtseizes and discard spells, you're often favored to just keep a mediocre 7 as long as it can play Magic, because you're going to lose cards anyways. They're going to strip them out, so you just want to have as many resources as possible. But, like, as opposed to that, maybe they're playing a combo deck, and you only need one counterspell to beat their entire game plan. So that's another reason to go as deep as possible. So you have that Force of Will or Spell Pierce, whatever it is that would give you a fighting chance in that match.
Also, in general, the newest mulligan rule, the London Mulligan, the one where you draw 7 and then put the extra on the bottom, a lot more forgiving to mulligans, so I've noticed an uptick in aggressive mulligan in a lot of strategies. Just keep that in mind.
The non sequitur one-liner I've heard about this is more than you think you should.
Yeah. But even when let's say you're on the draw, your opponent takes a mulligan, their choice of whether to mulligan or not may change your decision. And that's something that you see a lot at casual play, where you're on the draw and you mulligan before your opponent. You want to wait and resolve the mulligans back and forth properly in a competitive match.
To take a step back, in competitive play, the person who is playing first, the person who is on the play, chooses whether to mulligan or not before the person who is on the draw. So if you're on the play, I'm on the draw, you have to decide whether or not you're mulliganing, and then I can choose to mulligan or not after you decide that. But then we both go to 6, and then that happens again. So it's not like you go to 6, then 5, then I decide if I want to go to 6. It's just like that happens one section at a time. All right. Any last minute questions? If not, I don't know if these end at 3:50 or 4 o'clock anyway, so I think we're all set.
Technically 4 o'clock, but
Yeah.
there's no more questions.
Cool.
If there's
Thank
no
you
more
all
questions.
so much for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.